Hi, this is Andrew Moy with Tight Lines Fly Fishing in Parsippany, New Jersey. Today we're going to be tying a March Brown. This is an emerger pattern that I developed. It actually has the mayfly crawling out of the nymph. So the adult is going to be crawling out of the nymph. So it's a unique tie that I've developed. And I hope you'll enjoy the video and I hope you'll stay and watch it. So I'm going to come down the bend a little bit. If you notice how I've got this hook angled down in the vise, that's to make it easy to work in the back here until we get further forward. The hook I'm using is a Daiichi 1160 and a size 12. So this is a clink hammer style hook. So I'm going to bring my thread down that bend a little ways. And this is going to have 3 tails. So March Brown nymphs have 3 tails. Now the adult actually has 2 tails. It actually drops a tail. But we want to do this with 3 tails in the back here. You don't have to. You could do 2 if you want. It's not overly critical. But those fish do see those 3. And one thing with March Browns, their tails are very dominant. So this tail is going to be about 2/3 of the length of the hook shank. So those fish see those tails. They're very dominant 3 tails on those nymphs. So I'm going to tie that 1 tail in here. And I'm going to use, so the dubbing I'm using is going to be a Nature Spirit Extremely Fine Natural Dubbing in Tannish Yellow. I like Tannish Yellow because if you look at a March Brown underbelly, whether it's a nymph or the adult, they have a very pale underbelly that's like a tannish yellow. So that's what we're going to use here. We're going to use a very small amount of dubbing. I'm barely plucking at that dubbing. And I'm going to make a little ball right here. Okay, and you can kind of elongate that ball a little bit like that. I'm going to bring my thread forward a little bit. I'm going to take 2 more tails. And these are going to be tied in the same length as the other one. So I'm going to lock that in ahead of that ball of dubbing. And I'm going to work towards the ball of dubbing, but before I get to it, I'm going to split them, 1 on each side of that ball. And I just use my index in the middle and hold them with either finger like this and wrap up to that ball of dubbing. And that's going to give me a nice 3-tail split. Okay, if I want to narrow those a little bit, I could just wrap slightly up onto that ball of dubbing. And again, that'll give me 3 tails. All right, so if you look at a March Brown nymph, they've got a darker back and a lighter underbelly. So we're gonna use some turkey down the back of the nymph. But before we do that, we need to tie in a rib. And what I'm using here is Danville Monocord in yellow. Okay, if you again yellow because they have kind of a yellow rib and a yellow underbelly. So we're gonna use yellow. And I'm going to double it over. So this is Danville Monocord doubled over. And I'm just going to tie that in as a rib. And I'll bring that all the way up to the ball dubbing. I'll just set that aside. Now if you look at a turkey tail, it tends to be a little lighter on the bottom and kind of darker in color towards the top. So we're going to use the lighter towards the bottom section here. And I'm just going to take out a section using my bodkin. So I've got a little section here. This is a little bit less than 1/8 of an inch. Now that turkey tail, I sprayed it with a spray adhesive. That helps to adhere the fibers together. And if you look at this, it's kind of got like a very vibrant side here. And then if you turn it, it's more shiny. This is the underside of the feather. It's more shiny and kind of dull, if you will. So shiny and dull doesn't sound right, but basically it's not as like rich in color. It's more shiny white, if you will. So I'm going to tie that with the shiny white side up by that thinner tip right there. And I'm tying that in right up against that ball of dubbing, okay? And then we're going to take some more dubbing, and we're going to dub an abdomen, okay? Now, if you think about the abdomen on a mayfly and a thorax, they're really about 50% abdomen and 50% thorax in terms of length. So I'm going to want to just dub up about 50% of the hook. And I'm going to build a nice taper. And March Browns are fairly big bugs, so I'm going to have a decent amount of meat on this bug. Okay, not, it's again, trout fishing, you want to think sparse at times, but March Browns are a very big, fat, robust bug. So we're going to start in the back here, just not too big, and then just work a little bit of a taper. So we're just going to take our time and just build a little bit of a taper as we go. Okay, And now I'm going to start to flatten this hook out since I'm now getting away from the back of the hook. I'm just going to bring that up in the vise. And I'm going to continue to dub a little bit more forward. Again, we want to get to that 50% mark. You know, maybe 55% in terms of the abdomen, and then 45, you know, thorax. But personally, I think 50-50 is a good mix. You end up not crowding the eye as much, and you'll get a really good looking bug if you do it this way. So I'm just going to, again, continue to build my taper. And I want to go about 50%. So I'm basically there. Basically there. Maybe a little bit more. Just kind of, it's pretty good. That's about where I want to be. Now I'm going to take this wind case, so I'm going to tie that over. So I'm going to fold that right down the back. Tie that off. And then I'm going to take my monocord, and it's doubled, so I'm going to twist it. I'm just going to wet my fingers a little bit and give it a good twist. And I'm going to rib my body going forward. Notice I kind of twist it every time I come around just to keep it corded up, if you will. And you can see how that pulls that kind of that, I shouldn't call it a wing case because it's the back of the fly. It's not really the wing case, would be the thorax. But basically that back covering, it kind of pulls it together with that dubbing and makes it look nice. Okay, and it also gives the fly some segmentation. Okay, so there's the back part. I got my three tails and kind of my March brown abdomen there on my nymph. Now, in order to make this fly crawl out of the nymph, we're going to use a piece of monofilament. And what we're using is 15-pound Maxima. So this is going to get tied in, just a section, maybe 3-4 inches long. I'm going to tie it in with the curve up. And I'm just going to tie it in front of my abdomen, coming forward slightly. And typically what we'll do, and I forgot my glue, so what we'll do is we'll typically put a little bit of Zap-A-Gap on that. But since I don't have Zap-A-Gap, what I'm going to do is I'm going to burn the mono a little bit. Just make a little ball, and then I'm going to pull that through that thread wrap until that ball hits right there. Okay, so now that can't pull out. Okay, and if you notice where I tied it in, I'm staying no more than 50% of the way forward from the abdomen to the hook eye. I'm a little bit behind 50% probably. That's about where I want to be. Okay, now we're going to take another section of turkey for the wing case. And like earlier I said, we use this part down lower for the lighter color for the back. For the thorax, I want it a little bit darker. So I'm going to take a section from up here. And this section is going to be a little bit wider than the back. So I'm going to take like a solid 1/8 inch wide piece, if not a little wider than 1/8 of an inch. And I'm going to tie that in on top. Same type of thing, kind of shiny side up, so that we get that nice vibrant side when we fold it over. And I'm going to tie that in just behind the mono, ahead of the abdomen. So that's getting tied in just like you're doing a nymph, right up against that abdomen right there. And then now we're going to do a little bit more dubbing. So the same dubbing, and we're just going to dub a little bit of a thorax up to the mono for now. That's it, just to the mono. And notice I'm dubbing that a little bit thicker, right? A little bit bigger. I'm making my thorax now. So I've dubbed up to that mono, and I'm going to stop there. Now, here comes the interesting part. So we're going to do, we're going to take a partridge, and we're going to do burn wings on this and do realistic burned wings. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting some feathers off the wing of the partridge, basically, you know, these feathers in here. And I'm going to do one from each wing, from a left and a right. So I'll pull a left and a right out, and I'll show you the feathers, and then I'll show you how to burn them. You do need a wing burner, but it's not an expensive thing to get. And okay, one second. I just got to pluck one more feather out. Okay, so I've got a left and a right. Okay, so I'm going to take my wing burner, and I'm going to do one at a time. So I'm going to put this in the wing burner, and if you notice here, this side is kind of dark, and then this side is more like a tannish brown with some nice modeling. That's what we want to use for the wing. So I'm going to put this down in the wing burner, and if you notice that white stripe down the middle of that feather, we're going to hide that. We're going to put that just on the edge of the flat side of the burner. Basically, that white stripe should be right down here, just like that. Okay, and then we're going to take our lighter, and we're going to burn that wing. Okay, and then if you look at that, that's going to give us a nice wing. Okay, so and then we're going to take the other one and do the same thing. The only difference is now the tan side, because I pulled a left and a right, the tan is on the opposite side. So I'm going to make the belly, again, the belly of the wing on the tan side, not the dark black side. So I'm going to set that in my wing burner like so. I got that white stripe kind of down that flat edge, and then I'm going to burn that wing as well. Okay, and I just take it out of the wing burner. It'll have some burnt edges on it. Just pull those off. Now, I'm going to match the two up facing each other. So these are cupped towards each other. And I'm just going to cut that mono back a little bit so it's not in my way. So I'm going to leave about maybe 2.5 to 3 inches of mono there. Mine was about 4 or 5 inches, a little long. So you see those two wings there? I'm cupping them together. And what I want to do is just crease them a little bit towards the base, just so that they kind of angle away from each other. I can also just, what I want to do is I want to get the mono in between them like that. Actually, before I do that, I want to strip these. So if you look at the base, of these, I'm going to strip these right down here. I'll just strip it and then show you. It's a little hard for me to hold it down there. So I'm basically just stripping so that all I'm left with is the wings themselves. Okay, I've got bare stem there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie this in. I want to get one wing on either side of the mono with the belly down. See how the belly is down towards the wing case there? So the belly's down. And all I'm going to do for now, I'm going to just lay these up here. Again, make sure the tips of the wings are even and lined up. And I'm just going to take my mono and put it in my fingers out of the way like that. And I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3 loose wraps. And I'm just going to let my bobbin hang for a second. I can let go of my mono. Now the distance from the mono to the base of that wing is going to be how much that fly is crawling out of the mayfly. We don't want to make that distance too long, but we don't want it too short either. I would say you want it about anywhere from an 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch. Probably about 3/16 of an inch or so is about perfect. So if you look at that, that's about where I am right now. So I'm going to lift that out of the way again and just lock those in tightly now. So I've now secured those stems in place. And now I'm going to trim those out of the way. Just don't cut your mono. Make sure you're not cutting your mono, okay? Or your thread. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the wings and the mono and I'm going to hold that up. And I'm going to just go around everything. And I'm holding the wings and the mono with my thumb and index. and I'm just spiraling up, basically until I get to the base of that wing, right there. So my last thread wrap is there, and now I'm going to just spiral, kind of work my way back down that mono. Okay, and once we get down, we're just going to go around the hook, and then I'll pull this way. Okay, so we've got our wings and we've got our mono there. You see that? Bring this down a little bit in the vise so you can see it better. Okay, I'm just going to bring that down, and I'm going to bring the hook back up just so I don't slide off the front of the hook as I work here. Okay, now we're going to take a little bit more dubbing. And this, what I just did looks difficult, but it's actually pretty easy. It's not something hard to do. Do a couple of these flies and you'll figure it out pretty quickly. So I'm just gonna get some dubbing on the thread, and what we're doing here, you know, don't go too heavy on the dubbing, like a thin rope. And watch, I'm just gonna spiral up this mono. I'm gonna start at the base, and I'm gonna work a taper coming up. Work a taper coming up, and I'm just going to go up to the wings, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little bit more dubbing on there for one. And it's probably easier to make sure you have enough dubbing on there so you don't have to dub with that hanging off of there, but I can still do this. So I'm going to a little bit more dubbing. And again, I'm going to hold the wings now. I'm going to pull down on this, and I'm going to dub a head in front of the wing. So you're envisioning that you're finishing, making like the head of a mayfly here in front of your wings. And then once you've got that, if there's any dubbing left, just be careful. You can thin that out, or you don't, you know, just basically you're going to work this back down that body. Okay, so you got that March Brown coming out of the nymph there. Now, you're going to take those wings and just separate them. And what you're going to do is you're going to hold the mono and you're going to pull down on the dubbing. What that's going to do is it's going to set your wings further back. And you can even figure eight in between those wings if you want. Okay, to make them set apart from each other. I forgot to kind of figure eight them. Sometimes I do that, I figure eight them, but I'm going to pull down more on that mono and set those wings back. Okay, so then you kind of see how that's crawling out of the nymph. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the mono about maybe 1/4 inch from the dubbing. I'm going to hide everything, the dubbing and the wings. I'm going to use my lighter, and just be careful, just burn that mono down to the dubbing. And what that's going to look like, that burned mono, it's not going to allow the dubbing or anything to slip off, and it's going to represent kind of the eyes of the mayfly at the same time. Okay, once you have that, you can just put a few thread wraps. You really don't need more dubbing here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my wing case, and I'm going to split my wing case down the middle. So 50-50. I'm going to split that wing case right down the middle. And I'm going to fold this over like a wing case. And I'm going to kind of, you see how I'm kind of like pushing it back to create like a little bubble? Almost like it's breaking apart and the mayfly is crawling out of the nymph. And I'm going to tie that on in front of the body. And then the same thing on this side. I'm going to bring it around, crimp it a little bit, same as the other side. And then tie that there. Usually I figure eight those wings, that helps a little bit. I forgot to do that, but tie that in, and I'm going to trim the wing case. Okay, finish a little head and tie it off. And what you do is you just grease the wings, okay, with some fly floatant. Grease these wings and just let that nymph hang down under the film. And when the fish see this thing coming, it's extremely realistic. It looks like that bug is literally crawling right out of. You can see how that wing case is broken open and that mayfly is crawling out of there. It's an extremely effective pattern. Caught a lot of fish on this fly. You know, just glue your head. You can take a little magic marker if you want. Like I use these Coptic markers for a lot of things, but you just take a little bit of Coptic marker, just color that head. You can even color your hook if you want. Just be careful you don't get it in your dubbing. You know, and that's it. And the reason I used a lighter color thread is just so it doesn't discolor the body when it gets wet. So I can always magic marker that head at the end there and then glue it as needed. But thanks for watching. Effective pattern. I hope you enjoyed it. And good luck to you all. I hope you guys catch a lot of fish. Thanks a lot.